For 6 days it had been snowing. The prairie's bones were softened by thick, sluggish flakes that drifted like falling prayers, making even the fences appear to be ancient ghosts. The windows of Jedediah Boone's ranch home scuffed in the wind. The lantern, which Jed lighted every evening, glowed as it always did, dim, bright, and patient, but inside the fire snapped in its stone mouth, similar to how he carved names into the barn posts of long-dead animals and groomed the mane of his horse. His vow hadn't died with her, even though the person who had waited for him in the past was now interred beneath a line of cottonwood crosses. This wasn't out of habit or loyalty. It had been weeks since anyone had traversed that section of country. Silence and snowdrifts obscured the trail. The crows had even shifted south. Thus he noticed two dark figures against a white background. At first he believed them to be wolves. Then someone tripped. The second figure was caught in the middle by the older. They were human, barefoot, and wrapped in what appeared to be threadbare shawls and deer hide. Jed remained on the porch, watching the lamp next to him blow in the wind. Their eyes flickered like deer in shock from the flame inside. They stood uncertainly at the barnyard's edge without saying anything. Jed held up his hand, not exactly in response to his request, but also not in denial. A slow motion as tiny as a breath, enough, with a careful nod, the older one led the younger girl ahead. He opened the door to the barn. They entered. He took a while to follow. He felt the snow seeping through the solace of his boots as he stood there, gazing into the darkness behind them as though a third figure might materialize, someone claiming, someone pursuing. However, there was nothing except wind and a sacredly old silence. The smells of smoke, straw, and wet hide blended together inside the barn. The cow moved, but the girls cuddled next to it without objecting. Jed remained silent while sipping a tin cup of coffee by the stall post. He doubted that they could communicate in English. It was taken by the older one. She had chapped and red hands. Pale against her dark complexion, a small scar sliced through her lower lip. She didn't beg with her eyes. They passed judgment. She did not express gratitude to him, but she also refrained from spilling the coffee. The younger girl, who was hardly older than a youngster, mumbled something in a language he didn't understand as he turned to go. There was no translation from the older girl. He returned to the house and left the door open. He sat in the rocker. By the fire that night, whittling an old cedar stick to nothing instead of sleeping. Every sound was drowned out by the snow outside. However, he kept hearing that whisper. The girls were on the porch by morning. Before they knocked, he opened the door. They appeared shivering, half-frozen, and bent their heads. He gestured toward the fireplace. They entered the building. Their hands didn't stop shaking for 3 hours. He noticed that the younger one was now limping. She sat cross-legged on the floor after the elder girl gave her the lone chair. Jed handed him the bread he had and prepared some beans. He didn't ask any questions, and the females ate with delicate hands, appreciative but restrained and not desperate. The sun came up and went down again. The younger girl had a fever on the second morning. On the porch, Jed left a basin filled with water. The older daughter had already cleaned her sister's hair and hung the towels to dry when he got back from cutting wood. He watched with his arms folded and leaning against the doorframe. For the first time, she looked into his eyes without fear. She pronounced her first word while standing and approaching. "Chenoa," he blinked. "My sister," she responded, gesturing to the young woman. "Tasa," he gave a nod. "Jed," she hesitated. "Jed," she couldn't squeeze the word into her mouth, not exactly. She made another attempt, Jedediah. Later, when he saddled the mare to ride into town for supplies, she received that. Halfway to the gate, Chenoa trailed him. The snow had returned. Her brown hair had thin flakes that coiled like lace. She said, "You come back?" He gave her a hard-eyed, unreadable gaze and gave her a single nod. "Every night I light the lantern." Her head was cocked. Why? He simply rode away without saying anything? Compared to the prairie, the general store was colder. By discourse, not by temperature. When Jed went by the blacksmith Clovis hatch, he leaned in. "Are you aware of who they are?" Jed remained silent. A moist glob was splattered across the wood floor by Clovis. "I would bet on runaways or traded girls, Comanche. In any case, it's dangerous." Jed purchased a tin of cherry tobacco, flour, salt, and dried beef. The store owner arched an eyebrow. "Boone, do you expect company?" Jed gave a shrug. "How long the snow lasts will determine this." Chenoa greeted him at the gate once more upon returning home. She placed the tobacco in the cupboard as if it were holy, but she didn't inquire about it. When Jed went outside to the porch that evening, he discovered that the main room's curtain had been stitched. Not replaced, only repaired with tight stitches, even by someone who wanted to remember comfort. He placed his late wife's old scarf on the door's hanger without saying a word. Warm, weathered, and blue. Chenoa wore it the following morning. As he cut wood, she stirred the beans. Tiso read from a ripped primer that Jed couldn't recall ever possessing. It felt less empty in the house. He kept hanging around the table merely to listen to someone else's breath. After Tiso went to sleep that evening, Chenoa went outside. The shingles hissed in the snow. She let it to kiss her bare shoulders as she stood on the porch. Like a memory, the scarf stuck to her. Jed silently accompanied her. "You're quiet," she said. "You are too. This safe place," she added after nodding. He paused. "Yes, it's safer than most, but it's not far from the world." Chenoa pivoted in his direction. "You've been by yourself for a while? 12 winters?" She let out a leisurely exhale, exposing her breath to the chill. "Our previous home had a fire, as I recall. Deer stew smell." Mom sang once. Her tone changed. Then Trey arrived. "No, gals." Jed remained still. "We were exchanged for bullets by my uncle." Jed averted his gaze, but she added, "You didn't ask." "Didn't check." "I have witnessed too much to gaze." She barely made contact with his hand. "Do you believe we stay?" He didn't respond. Not with words, however. He failed to lock the door. 3 days went by. The sheriff rode in on the 4th. A gatepost was being repaired by Jed. Chenoa entered the veranda. Although he wasn't soft, Sheriff Arlen Crowley wasn't cruel either. He dismounted and said, "Town is uneasy. Claims that you are keeping Comanche women." Jed remained still. "They're not inmates. They are visitors." Crowley gave Chenoa a peek. "Are you claiming her?" Jed hesitated. "I'm not going to put her out into that, then." "I didn't ask that question." Jed clenched his jaw. "I own her." After examining him, the sheriff nodded, then declared official. He rode off before Clovis got smart. Jed faced Chenoa once more. She came down from the veranda and faced him. "Your law," Mary says. "Yes, it does." Reaching up, Chenoa pulled out the blue scarf after untying it. "Then, like a guy giving a gift, you give this to me once more." With, shaky fingers, Jed wrapped the scarf around her neck cautiously. They didn't mention love, but it existed in that gesture, quiet, weathered, and unflinching. He lit the lantern that evening as usual, but this time he was accompanied by someone and noticed a glow against the glass. Chenoa rested his shoulder with her head. For the first time in years, the wind didn't sound like sadness as Tiso slept beneath a quilt. It had a hymn-like sound. If this story made you feel something, don't allow it go to quiet. To let people know that the lantern is still burning, tap the like button. To delve further into stories of second chances, quiet redemption, and forgotten love, subscribe. Leave a comment below. Ever left a light on in the hopes that someone will come back? Additionally, keep in mind that often the quietest tales have the loudest reverberations. There will soon be more stories about Wild West Soul. Join the Circle of Firelight.